Welcome to the program, and as Australia slowly inches towards some form of minority federal government, it's becoming clearer tonight that the negotiation process could take weeks. The three independents who look set to determine the next government today presented Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott at separate meetings with a list of 7 detailed and ambitious requests that will take quite a time to respond to. The independents want to meet the heads of department covering 8 major policy areas, as well as Labor's caretaker ministers and coalition shadow ministers. The federal opposition leader Tony Abbott says he's not yet willing to agree to a particular part of the request that relates to costings, while Prime Minister Julia Gillard is seeking advice, because the independents also want advice from the heads of Treasury and Finance on the costings and impacts of government and opposition election promises. The times are getting more interesting by the minute, and we'll be taking a close look at another request that they want to explore, quote, consensus options, in just a moment. But first, here's political editor Heather Hewitt.
That's my spot. There it is.
A little bit further.
So why is everyone...
which way is where? That's what we're trying to work out.
Look who's calling the shots. Less than a week ago, these 3 independent MPs, Rob Oakeshott, Tony Windsor and Bob Katter, were virtual unknowns outside their own electorates and Parliament House.
How we resolve this difficult situation.
I just wanted to answer that question if I could, please.
Now they wield enormous power, and since the election, they've become household names.
We have met, we have developed a request for information, so a call for papers or a call for information on 7 key areas.
I think it'd be rude for us to start articulating what those 7 issues are when we're only just at this moment delivering it to the 2 potential Prime Ministers.
But not too rude to reveal this extraordinary request before they entered detailed negotiations with Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott on who should lead a minority government.
The key one of those is somewhat confronting for caretaker conventions, but we think it is appropriate that we do get access to the Treasury Secretary Ken Henry and the Secretary of Finance David Tune. We do think this is about the economy, and we do think the next 3 years need some consideration of things such as election promises.
We need to establish where the budget bottom line is. What are we actually talking about here in terms of the promises that were made during the election campaign by both sides? What are we actually talking about in terms of the financial arrangements in relation to broadband, for instance?
The Gillard and Abbott team spent the last few weeks of the election campaign hurling insults at each other about policy costings and who was the more economically responsible. Now they'd better hope their figures and forecasts were right, because they'll be a crucial element of the independents' deliberations. What's more, it will be a team effort.
Block's an uncomfortable word for all of us, but we have agreed to stand shoulder to shoulder to make sure we get this process right. We are also encouraging Andrew Wilkie to think about joining us as well, and for us all to make sure we are committed to the national interest, stable government, and working our way through this in a sensible manner.
But Andrew Wilkie, the independent who's almost certainly taken the seat of Denison in Tasmania from Labor, has indicated he'll be going it alone.
My aim is not to have a go at the other 3 independents. As far as I'm aware, they are 3 good men. But, you know, they're aware of the circumstances in which they have been elected. And I'm aware of the circumstances in which I've been elected. And I've been elected as a strong independent voice. And I don't think it would be treating the people who have voted for me with respect if I was to all of a sudden start forming a block with other independents.
Tony Windsor clearly isn't too keen on the word block either, and true to form, is not mincing his words.
When we get the information back, we could all head in different directions. And there is a third direction that I haven't ruled out, that if there's not goodwill displayed by both leaders and their party members, and if we can't see a future in terms of some longevity in terms of the Parliament itself from one government or another, I won't support either of them. So there is a third option, and that's another poll.
It's a possibility hanging over this whole process, and the entry of Andrew Wilkie could cloud things even further for Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott.
They both need to understand that I haven't yet made a decision whether I'll support the Labor Party, whether I'll support the Liberal Party, or whether in fact I'll support no party.
The fact is, no one knows how this is all going to unfold. But there's certainly more interest in politics right now than at any time during the election campaign, as shown by this packed audience at the National Press Club today. The three independents and the new Green member, Adam Bant, shared an unlikely forum.
We do indeed live in interesting times, and while Bob Katter may never have thought he'd be sharing a panel with the Greens, I never thought I'd find myself to the right of Bob Katter.
I've bought and sold cattle for a large portion of my life, and I'd like to think I can drive a deal.
And I get the irony that a new gang of fours in town, but I assure you we act for good, not evil. We act for good government, not bad government, because what we are advocating is more power to 150 members of Parliament in representing their electorates and, by logical extension, representing the people of Australia. Where we have gone wrong in Australia today by making it about the red team or the blue team and focusing so heavily on the executive, the gang of four, the Prime Minister, the vested interest, the head office, the polls, we have lost the focus on the local member.
To add to the general confusion this afternoon, it emerged that the three independents and Julia Gillard consider the West Australian Nationals MP Tony Crook, who's won the seat of O'Connor from Liberal veteran Wilson Tuckey, might also be part of the mix.
Can I get a view from you all on whether or not you would count him as being a one for the coalition? Tony Winton?
Well, I wouldn't, and I don't believe he is.
I have spoken by phone with him today. Mr Crook has indicated to me he does not consider himself to be a member of the Truss Nationals, his terminology, not mine, and in those circumstances he considers himself to be a person on the crossbenches, and I have undertaken to him to provide him with some information in writing about what the government's policies and plans mean for his constituency.
After her first face-to-face meeting with the three independents at Parliament House this afternoon, Julia Gillard expressed a willingness to address all of their 7 demands. The details of these have now been released and nothing is spared. Apart from seeing Ken Henry, they want briefings from all the major government departments, as well as their ministers and shadow ministers. They want a shake-up of parliamentary proceedings. They want all sides to explore consensus on how to reach a majority greater than 76 over the next 3 years. And then this.
They'd be looking for an undertaking that whoever forms government will go for a full term and not just string them along until the polls change and then call another election. Are you in a position to be able to offer that to them?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
She also happened to have some extra information on hand for them.
What I took the opportunity to do was to provide, Mr Katter and Mr Windsor and Mr Oakeshott with a folder each, which details what the government has achieved in their electorates.
What's not addressed in today's list of demands is whether the Greens having the balance of power in the Senate will play a key part in deliberations.
But there's an element that nobody is talking about, or the press certainly aren't talking about at the moment, and that is the Greens will support or control the Senate from next July. So a stable government, if it is to go beyond the rest of this year, financial year, needs to be a government whose policies are also acceptable to the Greens.
Does that mean a Labor government then?
We've seen the independents saying they'll talk to the Greens, they'll talk to everyone. Now that makes common sense. It's too early to make judgments about this.
Do you think that Tony Abbott and the Coalition are up to leading a minority government?
Well, it will be very difficult. They don't have much experience. But my real concern is the intense conservatism that has embraced the party.
The make-up of the Senate will play no role in who I back. nor will my political history. You know, I am genuinely an independent. Politically, I'm about centre. It will be all about which of the parties can deliver that stable, competent and ethical government.
Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott certainly have plenty to mull over in the days ahead, but there can't be truly meaningful negotiation until the last remaining undecided seats are settled. The three independents fly home to their electorates tomorrow morning, and Julia Gillard and Tony Abbott will pause to attend the funerals of 2 Australian soldiers killed in Afghanistan. They're all back on deck in Canberra next week.